Before we talk about what makes a good cop, I'm just going to really quickly recap the use of force rules in case you didn't catch it. The full video is linked in the description. If you're listening to police, you are compliant, so they cannot put their hands on you and the only thing they can do is use verbal persuasion. If you're ignoring police, you are passively resisting, and then they can escalate their actions to firm grips. If you're trying to evade the police, you're now actively resisting, and they can now use strikes like punching and kicking, as well as pepper spray, baton, taser, and compliance techniques. Now, if you're about to fight someone, and that includes anyone, not just the police, then you're put into a higher category, which is active aggression. Even though you're in a higher category, the amount of force police can use on you does not escalate. But police will be able to get away with using these techniques more aggressively because you are fighting. And lastly, if you're fighting anyone, but you're about to cause a serious physical injury, which generally means you're using a weapon, then you're put into the highest category, which is active aggression with weapons, and police can respond with their gun. So this chart outlines the amount of force police can use, and each action that a person does correlates to a specific reaction by the police. But an important thing to note here is that this reaction by the police is the maximum force police can use. But they don't have to use the maximum force. For example, we now know if someone is running away, the maximum force police can respond with is anything here. But they can also use something lower, like firm grips or even verbal persuasion. So police can always respond with a lower or equal force option. But they can never go higher than what is outlined in this chart. But let's take it a little further. Now that you know what the current rules are, ask yourself, do these rules make sense? Are they too lenient or too strict? Just because this is the standard doesn't mean we have to accept it. Well, the best way to answer this question is to hypothetically adjust the rules and see what possible outcomes we get. For example, if we think the rules are too harsh, what if we make it so police cannot grab someone if they're just passively resisting and should just continue to use more verbal persuasion? Well, if we do this, do we expect police to just keep pleading with a person forever until they listen? This would be impractical and police would have no way of controlling the situation. Okay, what if police aren't allowed to use any attack like their baton, taser, or pepper spray if someone is actively resisting? Because if you think about it, they're not trying to harm anyone, they're just trying to escape. Well, this would mean the only thing police can do is run after them and grab them, which is a problem because it would mean every cop would need to be physically bigger or faster than the person that they're trying to catch. Okay, what if police can't shoot someone with a bat or a knife? They can only use their taser. Does that mean police have to get close enough to a person so that their taser can be within range and hope that it's effective? People moving around or having a thick jacket, along with any other variable, can make a taser ineffective. Let's think about it the other way. What if we think the rules are too lenient? Like, what if we allow police to use their baton, taser, or pepper spray at passive resistance? Well, another phrase for passive resistance is civil disobedience. Can you remind me the last time police used force against people practicing civil disobedience? How did it look when people got attacked just for not listening? Okay, what if police are allowed to strike people that are kicking and spitting even if they're in handcuffs? But doesn't our Constitution protect people from cruel and unusual punishments? Attacking someone who's restrained is no longer police being one level higher, but instead borderline torture. Well, why can't cops rough up someone who ran away on them? It will send a message to people in the future to not run away. Well, how much roughing up is allowed? And people run out of fear and panic, not because they've rationally weighed consequences. Also, the government cannot and shouldn't be allowed to punish you without due process, even if you are caught red-handed. Listen, maybe these rules of engagement do make sense the way they are now, or maybe they don't. That's for you to decide and convince others what you think. Of course, when it comes to police using force, we tend to think that the lower the force you use, the better. And this makes sense, right? If police are able to target people down, it's a win-win for everyone. The suspect and the cop both get to walk away from the situation without injuries. And even if the cops have to go hands-on, if they use a light hand and are not overly aggressive, then it still works out for everyone. Because when police are too heavy-handed, the reputation of police becomes negative, which means eventually when a cop needs to ask people if they knew what happened with a crime, people won't want to help. And this means crimes won't get solved. Because the best detective in the world is nothing if the whole community doesn't want to talk. And when crimes don't get solved, it emboldens criminals to keep committing crimes because they see people getting away with it. And higher crimes puts the community and police in a more dangerous situation. But this doesn't mean that the solution is for cops to be too soft either. Because just how cops being too heavy-handed can be harmful, cops being too light-handed can be just as harmful. Because when cops are too light-handed, then they're not taken seriously, and people take advantage of that. If a cop is gently grabbing someone that's under arrest, then that person feels like they can fight back or escape. And when people have that feeling, the feeling that they can take on a cop, then it obviously means that more force encounters will happen because more people are willing to fight the police. And more force encounters puts the community and the police in a more dangerous situation. So it sounds like a good cop is not someone who tries to handle every situation with words. And a good cop is also not someone that handles every situation with a gun. A good cop is one that knows when to use words and when to use a gun. A good cop would recognize when someone is serious about causing harm, and they won't be afraid to use their gun to stop that from happening, because they know words will only prolong that harm. But at the same time, a good cop can recognize when someone is just going through something, and even if they present a danger, words are what they need.
Shoot me.
I can't do that, man. I was in your shoes a few months ago, brother. And I made the call. Took everything in my world to call VA. and I got the help. But I want to help you, man.
A good cop would already have their gun drawn in a dangerous situation, so the perp doesn't even think of acting violently.
All right, go take your hand out of your pocket.
No, sir, I've done nothing. I've done absolutely nothing, no.
Okay, seriously.
Put your gun down, really?
A good cop would also know not to draw their gun prematurely so they don't make people fearful. A good cop will call for backup and outnumber the suspect so they don't even think about resisting. A good cop would also know not to call for backup because that in itself can escalate the situation. A good cop would have a clean appearance and take care of their body because they know just the fact that they look competent and can handle a forced encounter is enough to prevent that forced encounter. A good cop would always control the situation. They would think about the future and won't give the suspect an opportunity to attack or run. They would know when a little bit of force early on can prevent a larger forced encounter later. A good cop is one that knows how to walk the line of stern but empathetic, strong but kind, firm but flexible. A good cop thinks so much into the future that they know just like how they are being carried on the backs of the hard-working officers before them, their actions today are going to create a reputation of police that future officers will be able to benefit from. A positive reputation of police can be so powerful that the reputation alone can be what makes less force encounters happen. Why do you think a cop can be smaller than the person they're arresting, but that person still listens? They know they can take that cop on. But they also know they can't take on the dozens of cops that will come as backup. Why do you think people don't run away from cops even though they can get away? It's because they know they can only get away temporarily, but eventually they will get caught.
Police caught the 19-year-old on July 7th. He faces a dozen charges.
Why do you think people act properly even when they don't see cops around? Because there's a reputation that police are always watching. They will always catch you, and they will always win. That is why police don't fight fair. And that is why police are allowed to use more force than someone else and not be on the same playing field. Because they have to win. It's not that they should win, they have to win. They always have to come out on top. As soon as they lose the reputation of being competent, then they have to work that much harder to do their job. Of course, a negative reputation can be just as damaging as a good reputation can be helpful. And police can create that negative reputation when they are corrupt, can't stop crimes, or are too aggressive and antagonize the people they're supposed to be helping. If everything police say is a command, and they act to make sure that command is enforced, then the relationship can get sour really quickly.
What is wrong with you?
When a state trooper gives you a lawful order, you do it.
Likewise, if everything police say is a plea for compliance,
Hey, stop.
then there is no control of the situation, and the situation can get out of hand really quickly.
Stop fighting now. Savannah police, stop fighting.
As you just learned, a person's actions determine how an officer can respond with force. But what if I told you how the officer responds is actually what drives how the person acts? In fact, how the cop responds determines how the whole situation could turn out. For example, if someone is erratically holding an axe, police can approach that man and demand him to drop the weapon.
Put the hatchet down! Put the axe down! Put the axe down! Put the axe down!
They can use verbal persuasion, and after multiple times of saying that command, police can stop the threat by using their gun to prevent harm to anyone.
10:33, shots fired.
This is not wrong, on paper. But if we look at what happened closer, the cop was the one who approached the suspect, making the threat of the axe more serious.
Put the axe down!
He also kept on repeating the same command, expecting a different result. Instead, the officer could have engaged the man from a distance, and he could have tried to figure out what was going on instead of getting tunnel vision about him dropping the weapon. Even though the shooting was deemed justified, perhaps it could have had a better outcome if the officer did things differently. And that's because your actions really do affect others. It's like when you're driving a car and then there's sudden traffic. If you slam on the brake, the person behind you may not have enough time to brake and end up crashing into you. But if you think in the future and give enough following distance ahead of you, you can slow down early and give that person behind you enough time to react to not slam into you. Even though you're not driving that other person's car, you have some control of whether or not they hit you. Likewise, police can control if a person attacks based off of the tactics that they use. This is why more and more police departments are using the principles taught in ICAT, which is a philosophy that tries to implement effective de-escalation. Just by using tactics like slowing things down and not rushing in, keeping distance and using cover, and communicating effectively, it can bring force incidents down, reduce injuries to civilians, and even reduce injuries to officers. In fact, police can control almost the entire situation even though they can't control other people's actions. That's why the burden always falls on police. When a cop shoots a man with a knife, people don't ask why the man pulled out a knife. People ask, why didn't the cop de-escalate that situation? Why didn't the cop keep their distance, or call for backup, or use their taser, and so on? It's always what the cop should have done better. And that's because they really do control the way the situation plays out. Now, some of this is an unrealistic expectation. We shouldn't drown ourselves in hypotheticals with police and imagine how events could have turned out differently if only they have done something else. At some point, there does need to be some accountability for the person who broke the law as well. But police are held to a different standard. They're held to a higher standard. And that is because they have so much responsibility. Not only do they have to control a situation, they have to control a situation where the people involved are either hardened criminals trying to kill them or good people who just made a mistake. One moment, a cop can be playfully talking to a kid.
Sure you wear your seatbelts when mommy's driving, okay? You understand? Okay? Okay? All right. All right, you be good. 145, I think we got shots fired at the outlet mall.
And the very next moment, they could be stopping a mass shooting.
Shots fired by police, I got him down!
It is very hard to do what they do, and that is why police are respected so much. Their job, when done right, deserves the respect, awe, and appeal that is often shown in movies. But only when it is done right, because when it's done wrong, it can be so damaging that the effects ripple beyond that bad encounter and make future encounters end badly.
Light him up! Go inside now! Get in the hole!
I command you to immediately disperse. Everybody move westbound on 34th Street towards City Hall.
Whoa! Fuck y'all!
She's walking away!
I'm on the ground!
Why y'all beating him?